You are looking at the Pageau 9T8 from Virtual Racing Cars, the newest car mod for Assetto Corsa from the team responsible for many of the greatest cars to ever come to this title. It doesn't take a very discerning eye to see that this mod is based on the Peugeot 9X8. It's an elite race car with daring design and top-level technology. VRC has captured this car in an impressive fashion, making this one of the most advanced cars in sim racing. Let's do a deep dive into what may be the best car we drive in Assetto Corsa this year. Okay, so to start things off here with our look at the Pageau 9T8 by Virtual Racing Cars, we should first talk about the car it is based on. You probably instantly recognize it, especially if you're a fan of endurance racing, as being based on the Pageau 9X8. This is a hyperclass car, Hypercar being the top division of the World Endurance Championship at the moment. LMP1 is gone, GTE is gone, LMP3. They're shaking things up in the World Endurance Championship. So currently the top division is Hypercar. So Pageau made their return in 2022 with this car, having previously raced the 908 ending in 2011. So a decade plus off, and this is what they came back with, and it has a lot of very interesting style elements. So we'll talk a little bit about the style, we'll talk a little bit about the drive of this car. To better understand this car, perhaps we can talk a little bit, sorry about my cursor being on the screen, we can talk a little bit about, the style elements, what makes it unique. So one thing you will often see on race cars is louvered fenders to help cool the brakes. If we go up above and look at the fenders, you can see the tire there clearly. They just made a complete cutaway and exposed the top of the tires. There's, strakes, canards, call it what you want, but little pieces of bodywork there helping direct the air around that gap. Gaps in body panels are rarely good for aerodynamics, but Pageau did think of that, and they helped direct air with those pieces of bodywork. If we go back around to the front of the car, we should have a look at these headlights. In fact, let's go back a little bit here. You can see the headlights here made in 3 strips and then one little supplemental outside light there. So very interesting design on the headlights of this car, and that is of course mirrored on the other side. And then you see that long piece of floor panel extending well beyond the front badge. You would expect on many cars for the badging to be the very front of the car, but that is not at all the case here. If you look at the left side of your screen, you see how far that floor extends beyond the front of the car, and then again a couple of canards above that. So very interesting nose design there. If you look at the center of your screen, you can see those mirrors, those tiny little mirrors, almost swallowed up by that big piece of bodywork beside it, and more louvers. They got the exposed top fenders there, but also louvers behind just in case. So very concerned about braking temperature or tire temperature, perhaps. All those factors that go into making the car efficient, of course. We can see the car in profile now, and quickly just open the door, and just behind where the driver would sit is a V6 engine, a 2.6 liter V6 engine to be specific. Twin turbo. The car is making somewhere around 670 horsepower. It is supplemented by a electric motor and battery system, so it is a full hybrid. If you're wondering about the naming convention, 9X8, the X being all-wheel drive, and again, it is supplemented by that electric motor. Now, I am specifically, or deliberately rather, avoiding the obvious. A lot of you will know where I'm going with this. When I talk about the style of the 9X8, we can't talk about it without mentioning the absence of a rear wing. And yes, I know there are semantic discussions to be had about what constitutes a rear wing. Do these little tips here, these pieces of bodywork here, does that constitute a rear wing? Maybe by some loose definition, but most of us think of a rear wing as being detached from the body, raised up away from the body, so that air can flow over and under it. So we could consider this a wingless car, and Pageau even admits that this is a wingless car. Let's get those headlights off. So yeah, they went a different direction with their car. Now, is that a unique design in racing? No. If you're a fan of NASCAR Cup or Xfinity, you probably know all about cars without rear wings. Or if you're a Formula E fan, the Gen 3 cars do not have rear wings. You might remember the Delta wing. Sprint cars don't have rear wings. So it's not as if it's completely unique. It's not as if it's a one-off to not have a rear wing. However, new cars rolling into major series without rear wing is certainly a bold design that Pageau decided to go with. Has it been successful? Not exactly. Pageau has entered 2 cars, and in 2022 they had 3 races. They had some DNFs in there. They came back in 2023, raced the whole season, and did manage to get 1 podium. They were 3rd at Monza, or put 1 car into 3rd position at Monza, which of course is great, but still yet to get its maiden win. So the hypercar class, of course, still very new. Things are still sort of evolving. We expect to see, or some of us expect to see, Pageau eventually add that rear wing to overcome some of the challenges they're having and hopefully get that first win. But as of right now, the only official images we have of the car, the only official data that we have on the car has it without that rear wing. But there are some photos that look roughly the same quality as you would see in a Bigfoot photo of the car with a rear wing. So Pageau likely going that direction, and we should see that in competition. I don't know about this year, but maybe at some point this year or in the future, Pageau will likely add that rear wing. So hopefully they will have more success. As I say, the Hypercar series is still so new that it's hard to tell exactly how it's going to shape up and where things will land once all is said and done. But Pageau definitely in the running for being competitive. Again, they got that 1 podium, so we'll see what lies in the future. Another interesting design element of the car, you can see above the driver's head that snorkel, which I would expect, first of all, to be kind of flush with the roof paneling, but it is not. It stands slightly proud and is triangular shaped. You don't see a lot of triangles used in cars, unless, of course, you count NACA ducts as triangle shape. But generally, triangles aren't favorable in automotive design, but this is the way Pageau went with that triangle design. And just to reinforce the fact that it is a triangle, to make sure you notice their triangle, they put the yellow trim on this specific livery just to highlight that. So when we talk about the livery, of course, this is not a real-world livery. You do see the Hypercar logo there. I think that's as close as we get to being an official livery, but you can see the badging for VRC and some made-up brands, and even the Peugeot logo is Pageau. So yeah, VRC, of course, cleverly getting around any copyright issues. So that's about it for my look at the at the Peugeot 9X8. Now let's go ahead and jump on track, and we'll do a deep dive into what is the Pageau 9T8 for Assetto Corsa. Okay, so here we are at Mugello taking a look at the Pageau 9T8, and it's important to preface this because I'm going to do a deep dive into the features of this car. It won't be comprehensive. There is more to cover, but realistically, in the interest of time, there's an 8-page manual that is included with the car that you can read to find out more about it, but I'm going to try and hit at least the high-level interesting elements of this car. But in the midst of this deep dive, you should understand that you don't need to do all this. So what I'm going to be running is the CSP version of this car, the custom shaders patch version of this car, which is very sophisticated. There's a lot of customizations. I would say it's important to customize this car to your liking, but if you just want something to hop in and drive, I want to make sure you know that there is a non-CSP version of this car included with your purchase. So when you purchase it, you get 2 versions, the CSP and non-CSP. And if you just want to hop in and drive, have a good time with your Peugeot 9X8, you can absolutely do that. All you need is the non-CSP version, hop in and drive. There's still some customization options, but realistically, out of the box, you're going to go default setup and you're going to be just fine. But I'm going to be talking about the CSP version, which adds a lot of interesting elements to the car. It's most noticeable when you're driving. So much of the talk about how this car performs and what you can accomplish accomplish with the car, thanks to the CSP version, is more evident when driving, so I will talk about that. But while we're here in the pits, we can have a look at a few things. So let's go ahead and open up the pit menu here. As you can see, I've got one saved setup here. Gearing, there are actually two sets. One is slightly more open. You can see top speed 351, top speed 332 for gear set 1. So it's basically a Le Mans and non-Le Mans version. Of course, here at Mugello, I don't think I will be hitting that theoretical top speed of 332, so I'm going to keep it at gear set 1. Tires. There are 4 compounds available in the CSP version of the car and 3 compounds available in the non-CSP. So you have a soft cold, a soft hot, and a medium compound in the non-CSP version. And here with the CSP version, we add a 4th, pardon me, which is the wet version, or aqua as they call it. So, of course, I don't want that. I'm going to keep it at medium. And then, of course, you have tire pressure adjustments. Fuel capacity, 80 liters tops. Now, I want to pause there for a minute because I want to just let you know that this car hardly burns any fuel. So, I am averaging here at Mugello about 1.4 liters per lap. That is very, very conservative. So, I'm going to keep a light fuel load here because I'm probably not going to do more than about 10 laps here, depending on how we get on with the car. But just to let you know that you're not going to burn probably nearly as much fuel as you would expect to. So keep your fuel load light, save a bit of weight. When we get into electronics, as you well imagine with a car like this, with that hybrid system, your deployment is very, very important. So we have, you can set deployment strategy here, but we can also, of course, adjust that while we're driving. So we have 4 deployment strategies, and the one is the most conservative. That is deploy off. So, yeah, we're going to keep that while we warm the car up. Engine braking, of course, it's important to recover energy and funnel it into that battery to recharge while you're racing. So you can set different engine brake levels depending on how much you want to feed into the battery when you're off throttle. Aero, I will say it is extremely important with this car because it doesn't have that rear wing. The car is very dependent on the air going under the car. So keep an eye on your setup, specifically the ride height and rake. It is very important how the car performs. Is it going to make it drivable versus undrivable? No, but you will certainly find some performance advantages by sort of monitoring how high the car is, and again, the rake of the car. We can also adjust the front underwing. Actually, let's look at this. Sorry, just give me a second here for the camera to pan to a suitable spot. Come on, camera. There we go. Okay, so if we look, let's zoom around back of the car here. Try not to make you dizzy. But yeah, if we look at the back of the car here, I'll try and there we go. Okay, so you can see the rear of the car here. You can see it's got the back of the car here has these body pieces here with gaps in between, and then 1-2 steps of I don't know what you would call that. I guess that's a strake, and this is running the late aero kit. If we flip it to the early, you can see that upper strake is gone, and this is a solid panel across here, or it is split, but anyway. The gaps are filled in. So there's 2 aero kits, and those are more than visual. Those are actually functional. So it's going to affect how the car, how the air goes over the car. And then front underwing, I'm not sure you'd be able to see this, but we have settings from 0 to 20. So depending on the type of course or the course you're running, you can adjust the underwing. And again, very important to understand that the air flowing under this car is more important than it is on most cars, because again, it's absent a big tall wing like you might see commonly in other cars. If we go to brakes here, you can see it has functional brake ducting. This is something that's becoming, I guess, more prominent in mods, in Assetto Corsa mods. So the Virtual Racing Cars team did include that functionality here. Earlier on, we looked at electronics. You can see the deployment strategy, but if you go into deployment strats here, you can set 1, 2, 3, and 4 for how they function. So deployment strat 1, you can see it kicks in at 190 and kicks out at 270, etc., etc., and you can see Like you can see this massively wide range here on Strat 4. Strat 4 being the highest, that's basically your qualify mode. So everything above 150 kilometers per hour, you will get that bonus boost there from the electric motors, and that really won't top out. I doubt you would hit 330 kilometers an hour in this car. I think it'd be kind of special scenarios where it does that. So you're basically going to have constant electric motors helping power the car. But that is customizable there, so you can set your strategies. Drivetrain, of course, you have differential, rear preload, rear coast, rear power, so you can set those to your liking. Your steering ratio, functional steering ratio, you have fast, medium, and slow. I'm going to keep it at medium for now. That's kind of how I got used to driving the car, but very cool that VRC did include functional steering ratio here. Power unit, there's a dry and a wet torque map. As you can imagine, with the wet torque map, the car is less sensitive to throttle input, so it's just basically changing the linearity of the throttle there. Torque split, this is something that's very important. It's defining how we use the combustion engine and MGUK to deliver power. So the higher you go, basically, the more it uses that MGUK, and just be warned, my experience thus far has been the more MGUK you use, aka electric motors, the more understeery the car tends to be. So I will generally set that a bit lower. I think I've found 4 is kind of my magic level. But you can see you can set the minimum speed, I guess, for BOP. I don't really understand that one. Little spelling error there by virtual racing cars. Not a big deal, but that would obviously relate to the torque map, but I'm not exactly sure of the functionality of that. We can adjust the power level outputs here of not only the ICE here, but power level there, maximum energy per stint. I don't know why you would adjust that. That's very interesting. I suppose you could set the sort of maximum energy deploy between pit stops in order to conserve something for the teammate you're handing the car off to, perhaps. This is very important here, this traction control. It's a 2-stage traction control. I don't have a cutoff mapped here. All I have mapped is the target slip. So what that's going to do, obviously, is control how much slip it allows before the traction control kicks in. So the higher the setting, the earlier the traction control will kick in. So lesser value should give you less traction control input. To start things off, though, while we're getting the tires warmed, I'm going to kick that up. Suspension, it's nothing too outrageous here. It's much of what you would expect for suspension adjustments. But again, just keep in mind when you're making all of these adjustments that the ride height and rake is quite important with this car. And then we have main here, rear anti-roll bar. We're actually going to be able to adjust this on the fly, interestingly. And speaking of, let's go ahead and jump into the car. We should talk a little bit about audio, I guess. There are audio settings. You can read this on your own time. Let's see, what do I have? Whoops. So these are the recommended settings. This is a new layout for audio. I just updated CSP. I'm not used to this version, but if you go into pure config as well, there are sound settings you should set. So just make sure, I mean, rain and thunder don't matter so much, but of these upper settings, just make sure you have these set approximately to what I have here. Recommended that you turn the wind all the way off. And again, those audio settings, but that's all in the manual. What else was I going to talk about? Oh yeah, the extended controls. Pardon me, I've got to find it. There we go. Extended Controls app is included with your purchase. And this is where we get deep and technical with this car. So these are things you can adjust on the fly. Now, if you're used to a modern Formula 1 car in sim racing, you know there's a ton of adjustments you can make on the fly, and this 98 is no less sophisticated. So we have various tabs across the top here. Under the critical tab, ignition and starter, of course, you want to be able to start the car. That's very important. Next in previous gear, nothing fancy here. You can choose to map a button for neutral, to drop the car to neutral, and of course you would want a clutch. That is actually very important. I'll show you why in a second. Brake bias we can set to increase and decrease on the fly if you wish. Here's where we get into the two-stage traction control. I actually have this mapped. I happen to have on my wheel a traction control knob, so I'm going to go ahead and set that to 10 as we get started here. But again, I have increase and decrease set. I don't have anything mapped to cut. That's something I've still yet to explore on this car. Overtake button, very, very important. It can go two ways, by the way. It can be a hold or a toggle. So I have it at hold. So when I hold down this specific button on my wheel, it's going to give me that manual KERS boost. Very important for reaching top speed, so we'll see that when we're on track. Torque split as well. What do I have mapped there? Yep, I have that torque split. So again, that's determining how much of that MGUK energy goes into feeding the car. So can mess around with that. Deployment strategy, this is very, very critical. Right now I am on 1 just to sort of get things going, but it goes all the way up to 4. So 1 being, I believe, build mode, and then 2 I think is balance, 3 is attack, and 4 is qualify if I'm not mistaken. So good to keep it low while you start out. By the way, if you have MGUK deploy set in Content Manager, that can interfere, so make sure if you're having issues mapping this in your extended controls app, just make sure that you don't have it mapped in Content Manager. It should be exclusively mapped in extended controls. So unmap it before you jump into the game if you want to map it in extended controls. Engine, the torque map, of course. Where do I have that mapped? There we go. So this one, yeah, less important. I wouldn't think, unless you're running dynamic weather in Assetto Corsa, that this would really factor, but you could probably just set it up in the pits as dry or wet and just go with that. But you can map it here to increase and decrease. Suspension, anti-roll bar, where do I have that? I think I have that mapped somewhere. There we go. So I can increase the anti-roll bar effect. I think it goes from -10 to +10. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to keep it neutral right now. We're getting to the final parts here. Headlights, of course, nothing fancy. What do I have mapped as headlights? There we go. That's my headlights. Okay. And you can change your display page. This display at the center of your screen, of course, tells you all of the onboard systems. It tells you your brake temperature, your tire pressure, gear, what mode you're in, etc. So you can adjust display pages if you wish. And then we have a pit limiter. I don't know why you would want a pit limiter necessarily in Assetto Corsa. It does it automatically, but just the same, you can do it. And then force feedback increase and decrease. And that may actually be a factor here. So I'll talk about why in a second. Let me go ahead. Did I make any changes? I can't remember if I made any changes or not, but that should be it. Okay, it is time to drive. So I am going to quickly boot out because I got to adjust one thing on my rig, and then we'll get back in here and drive. All right, so we are ready to go now. I have everything booted up that I need. And for those familiar with virtual racing cars and their recent work, you know they have a starting process. But the starting process is actually different in this car because we have the hybrid powertrain. We have a bit of added functionality. So I am going to go ahead and turn my ignition on. You see the screen comes to life. We have lights. We have power in the vehicle. This is tremendous. Now, of course, you need to start the car. So hold down my starter. C'est bon. Very good. Now, what is different about that? Let's go ahead and kill the engine. So we'll go back to ignition on. Guess what? Because I have a hybrid drivetrain, I can click into gear and I can roll just on the electric power. Now, how do we get the combustion engine to come on? Well, this will work fine for getting us through the pit lane. As soon as we leave the pit lane, you can see that speed starting to decrease. So I pull the clutch on my wheel, I dump the clutch, and that ICE bump starts to life, and we are rolling with the Pageau 98. Very cool function. All right, so let's double check that we have all our systems set correctly. So we are at Strat 1, which is kind of the build mode. Traction control, we will dial that up. And then what else do we want to map here? Torque split, let's get a little bit of extra juice going. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna dial that back. I usually run it around 4. seems to be a healthy level. We'll keep it there. But because this runs CSP tires, it's going to take a lap or two to get these up to temp. So I'm not going to try and set any sort of records here. I'm just going to kind of get things warm while I get used to driving this car. Truth be told, I am not getting used to driving this car. I've put in many hours in this car already. I raced it last night, being January 12th, and then woke up January 13th, drove some more, recorded a video, realized my mic wasn't on, so I had to re-record, and here we are. So I am used to driving this car to some extent. I kind of know what I like in it. So let me talk about the driving experience. What is the first thing you notice about your Pageau 9T8? Well, the suspension detail. I am not sure if this was the intent of virtual racing cars, if they set out rather to make the best feeling car in the history of Assetto Corsa, but they may well have accomplished that. The car, whoops, why did my torque split adjust? That's strange. Phantom button push. But previously, my sort of frame of reference for suspension detail was the IER P13C. Maybe I have that naming convention wrong, but the IER hybrid car, excuse me, the IER prototype car, P13C I think was in fact the correct designation, but they had done so much work on that car, bringing it to Assetto Corsa on the suspension, and it just felt so incredibly detailed, and what was being translated through your wheel was like nothing we had felt before in Assetto Corsa. Now that IER car is starting to show its age a bit, but still fantastic by any measure. But I would say this Pageau 9T8 just about, in fact, it does exceed what the IER. So the IER will always hold a special place in my heart because it was so far ahead of its time, but we've seen, you know, different mod creators, specifically VRC and RSS, you know, really pushing the limits of what the suspension can do thanks to the custom shaders patch. But I would say with this 9T8, we have a new high water mark for how good suspension can feel and the level of detail being translated through your wheel in a racing sim, certainly in Assetto Corsa. The level of detail in the force feedback is absolutely phenomenal. The suspension work they have put into this car is just mind-blowing. It is absolutely staggering, and you feel everything. Things you didn't realize you were absent in other cars. It just feels so incredible in this car. Again, I don't know if this was the intended focus of virtual racing cars, if, you know, they put in extra work on the suspension to ensure it would feel good, and, you know, we're hoping the fans would notice, or if this is a sort of accidental byproduct of just making a really great mod. But either way, the car feels fantastic. And just quick note there, top speed of 296 kilometers an hour on that straight. And we'll get back to that point in a second. But either way, again, this is the best feeling car I have ever felt as far as its connectedness to the road. Absolutely phenomenal. The one thing I would caveat is, thankfully I have, you know, a pretty incredible wheelbase here with this Moza R16, and it is able to translate all those forces. I would say that what you can feel with this car is probably best appreciated with a higher end direct drive motor. So I think probably if you had a sort of beginner or intermediate wheel, obviously you're going to lose some detail, but I would say you probably will be less blown away by it. So just fair warning that if you have, you know, kind of entry-level gear, that you might not be able to appreciate everything I am saying about the suspension on this car. But with that said, if you are fortunate enough to have a direct drive wheel, or you know, a higher end direct drive wheel, you will be able to really feel what this car is doing. It is absolutely incredible what VRC has achieved. Again, the sort of best feeling suspension and best feeling force feedback I have ever felt in any car. This is truly, truly mind-blowing. What an achievement by VRC. So that's kind of the first thing you notice. By the way, I told you I would get back to top speed of the car, so I'm going to use that KERS boost that I mapped, and we'll see what that does to our top speed. Last time around was, what, 296? We're zooming down here. I can't see my speed. It's tucked behind a lap time. There we go. 305, 306, 309, I think I saw. So again, that KERS boost that I mapped, very, very important that you do the same. So yeah, again, the first thing you notice is that suspension, or the force feedback detail you're able to feel with the advanced suspension that's at play with this car. Mind-blowing. Second thing you'll notice is it is surprisingly understeery. It's, I guess, because of the all-wheel drive system, but the car can catch you out. I've thankfully had a few hours to kind of get used to it, but I spent the first couple of hours really, you know, fighting it at times and trying to find optimal levels of the onboard systems to sort of mitigate that effect. But there is definitely a feeling of weight, of heaviness to the car, and it does tend to understeer, and it'll just catch you out. All of a sudden, it just kind of launches into a understeer situation, and you might find yourself going off track. So if that happens to you, it is not you, it is the car. So you can try lowering your traction control to get a bit more motion, whoops, at the rear of the car. Yeah, just that's the second thing I noticed, is I did not expect it to be as understeery as it is. So again, you'll have to work with the systems on board, and you can, you know, obviously adjust the torque split and things like that to help mitigate that effect. But that is one thing you notice. Third thing you notice is it is not nearly as planted as an LMP1 car. So obviously LMP1 now being behind us. LMP1's, I believe the best one ever made for Assetto Corsa, also happens to be by Virtual Racing Cars. Their Tagoni T50, brilliant machine. I love that. You've seen me feature that car in so many videos, and there's a reason. I love that car. But the LMP1 cars are so stuck. They are just planted to the ground in every scenario, and you can push, and if you push too hard into a corner, generally that car will help you get back on track, literally and figuratively, thanks to just being so capable. This 98 requires a lot more of the driver, so you'll see me on corner exit, you'll kind of see me battling the wheel at times. It's nothing too bad, but if you have the traction control set to sort of be biased toward performance as opposed to control, you will see me fight, or sorry, what am I saying? If you have your traction control more biased toward performance as opposed to control, you will probably have to wrestle the wheel a bit on corner exit. And going through high speed sections, again, it's not like the LMP1s where it's just automatic, like you're gonna get through there no problem. Even this upcoming chicane here, one of my favorite chicanes in racing, this quick left right here, not the best line, but you get my point. I was able to go full throttle there, but oftentimes, depending on my tire temperature, depending on my angle of approach, it can't be taken flat, and it requires just that little bit more of you as a driver. Alright, so coming up to the end of, I don't know which lap we're on now, but this is going to be about a 140.717 in fact. So we'll see if we can start to trim down some lap times. I'm going to start to increase the deploy as soon as I get around the next couple of corners and can reach for that on my wheel. And then we'll see if we can start to turn some more serious lap times here. Definitely with my skill set and with very little tuning, this car is capable of 138s is kind of my best. But there is certainly a lot more in this car.
Subscribe to Sim Racing 604, my favorite YouTube channel.
Not sure why I went down to second gear there, but that's okay. But again, I will just reiterate, and I don't think I did a very good job of saying it last time, but the level of detail coming through my wheel right now is just absolutely staggering. Best I've ever felt. It truly is. You can just feel every bit of slip. You can feel those curbs in detail that I have never felt before in Assetto Corsa, and it's just a testament, a total testament to the work of Virtual Racing Cars on this machine. Whatever they did, whatever magic they put into play with this machine and its suspension physics, man, I hope that applies to all future cars. And speaking of future cars, we have one more of these coming from Virtual Racing Cars. They made reference, if you watch their launch video on the official VRC channel, we saw a silhouette at the end. It was a teaser of an upcoming car, and they have made it very evident that this is going to be part of a series, not a one-off car. And it looks like the next one we get will be the 499P. So very exciting. I would look forward to anything which Virtual Racing Cars does, but especially with what they've been able to accomplish with this 9T8. I mean, it's just unbelievably impressive, and so to know that there's more cars coming in this series, big news in my world. Very excited to try that. Alright, so the increase in deploy has not seemed to net me anything, so next time around I'm going to go ahead and kick that up into quali mode. We'll see if we can't. In fact, there I go with my torque split again. I guess I keep bumping. Oh, I know why. There we go. That's anti-roll bar. Huh, what am I bumping? There we go. I don't know how I'm bumping that. It's at the center of my wheel, but regardless, seems to be an issue for me. So what was I saying? I was saying that I'm going to bump it up to quali mode and see if we can set a personal best, see if we can get in around the 1 minute 39 mark. The deploy is still very, even in strap mode 2, there's not much deploy. I'm still sitting at 100% battery. Could be to do with the engine braking. There's so much you can tune on this car. I don't expect this to be anywhere near perfect. Alright, let's see what we can do here. Try and get a good exit here. Manual curves, deploying. We got a decent launch here. We're already up to 290 kilometers an hour. 300. And I think in strat mode 4, if I'm not mistaken, that deploy continues up to about 330 kilometers an hour. So I would have had deploy on that whole start-finish straight. Whoa, that was close. But yeah, just the level of detail in that force feedback just keeps blowing my mind. I have not got used to that at all. When you put it on the curb like that, you can just feel everything those tires are doing and know when it's safe to accelerate again. Just staggering. What is less than staggering is this lap time. I'm not having a good lap here, folks. So we'll go one more here, see if we can set a personal best. I think my tires are getting a bit hot. I think that might be part of the problem. Yeah, indeed. Both fronts are very warm, so I need to do some tuning, need to do some refining of the setup. Try and squeeze some more out of that. It's maybe close to, yeah, it's a personal best, but certainly not my cleanest lap. 139.871. Focus on the driving here, and I'll let you hear the sounds. Ugly. So certainly not my most tidy lap. but passable just the same. So down into the 138s as I had hoped. So that's pretty much going to conclude my time with the 9T8. I think it's another brilliant work by Virtual Racing Cars. I mean, I say it time and time again, but every single car they seem to release seems to really push the limits, and I appreciate that. I mean, we're seeing that from Race Sim Studio as well, but it's kind of in a different manner. Race Sim Studio, much of their work has been focused on GT3, which is like, we have so many GT3s, but they have taken it to a place where it just has improved the feeling of GT3 and Assetto Corsa so much that you can't help but appreciate what the work they're doing. Virtual Racing Cars taking more of a, not risky, but being a bit more daring in their approach, I would say. Taking a wingless race car and trying to find fun in that, and I think they absolutely have. I think it's a phenomenal car, and very technologically advanced, and they just seem to deliver time and time again. So again, knowing that this is part of a series, knowing that we're going to get some, whatever they call it, but some equivalent of a Ferrari, is just the best news I could imagine, because I want to see more like this. This is brilliant. This to me is an instant buy. I wouldn't think about it. It's so good. Again, if you're sort of intimidated by what the car is in terms of its technical capabilities and how to set it up, there is a non-CSP version. You can skip over everything I covered in the first half of this video and just enjoy yourself driving, and frankly I can almost guarantee you will. This is an excellent feeling car, and just takes advantage of everything, all the recent developments in Assetto Corsa, and just makes for a phenomenal driving experience. Alright, well done to VRC, and thank you folks for watching. Enjoy the replay, and we'll see you next time.